Helga, thank you very much. I will specifically make my comments on subsidiarity, bearing in mind what colleagues have said before. Now, the two interesting things about the whole reform process that really do shine out in Prime Minister Cameron's correspondence to Donald Tusk for me are Europe where necessary and competitive test. We should not be doing anything at a European level unless it is absolutely necessary for it to happen at a European level. And secondly, we must then be doing it in an appropriate fashion. And competitive tests, we shouldn't be doing anything at all, either at a national level or European level, if it is going to detract from our competitiveness. And that applies particularly to the European scenario. Now, of course, on a subsidiarity basis, I take on board the points that have been made. But at the moment, the only subsidiarity check that takes place is right at the beginning of a process. And even then, it is not on an entirely satisfactory basis. And so we quite often find ourselves in a situation where what has gone into the legislative making machine at the outset may well pass a subsidiarity check. But actually what comes out at the other side is a plain and utter failure and would never have passed the same subsidiarity check. But because the timing is at a different stage, the processes are not there to allow that to happen once again. And that is a fundamental reform that needs to take place. Now, far too many of my colleagues, and my most recent experience of trying to get my latest report through committee is this, that far too many of our colleagues, mainly from the Socialist and also the EPP group, are actually regarding subsidiarity and trying to bridge the gap between ourselves and national parliaments as in some way a threat upon their function within the European Parliament. Now, it should be blindingly obvious to anybody involved in legislative processes at either a national or European level that this distance must be bridged in some way. Now, our view ought to be that bringing in national parliaments on a much closer basis to our legislation-making processes actually strengthens us at an EU level, because it ensures that we have input from the national level right at the outset and throughout. Now, the means in which we do that, there's been much talk before about some of the systems that we have. Yellow card, do we now take that forward? Well, certainly in the negotiations that have just taken place in my committee, the jury committee, so far as use of the terms of red card or veto were concerned, this is an absolute non-starter. So it may well be that actually we have to package up exactly what we're looking for, but label it in very different terms. Maybe a yellow card phase 2. Which in effect provides the same powers, possibly to a different number of national parliaments who are still able to club together and actually not just press under the yellow card system a pause button, but under what would be a red card system, but by another name, have the ability to press genuinely the stop button. Now, that is not something the Commission is going to give up on very easily at all, and certainly we as a group are going to have to take this fight forward within the Parliament, but it can succeed providing the overall reform programme is giving the same sort of direction. Now, so far as an indication as to the direction of travel is concerned, one only has to look at the current negotiations under the interinstitutional agreement. Now, whilst Frans Timmermans' appointment genuinely was very helpful right at the outset and remains so in many respects now, I'm afraid the introduction of Guy Verhofstadt on behalf of the Parliament into the process is starting to pull away from much of the genuine helpfulness that we were beginning to get. And just as an example of that, he has already written off the whole idea of an independent impact assessment board. And his rationale and reasoning for that is that we can never have it on a genuinely independent basis, because the people that make up that board will feel beholden to the institution that has appointed them. That is something that we as a group certainly should be taking up. It cannot be beyond the wit of man to establish a genuinely independent board. And it's essential because otherwise we're going to keep finding ourselves in this situation where the Commission puts the cart before the horse and the impact assessments are producing an outcome to justify the policy they wanted in the first place, which undermines a whole subsidiarity issue right from the outset, because quite often that has no incorporation of national parliaments' interests. Thank you.